"Stop playing games!" Tiffany hissed, then shoved me down the stairs. I hit every hardwood step like a rag doll. Blood filled my mouth. Pain lit up my hip. But worse? As I lay crumpled at the bottom, my sister Patricia rushed in and defended her. "What did Monique do to you, baby?" she asked Tiffany, like I was the villain. That's when I knew it wasn't just a fall. It was a setup to steal everything Mama left me. But they forgot one thing. Mama never trusted them with the real documents. I did. And I never hand over what's already mine. My name is Monique Carter, and I'm 45 years old. Since Mama passed, I've become the steady heart of our family, hosting Sunday dinners in her cherished Victorian home and helping with everything from tuition bills to crisis loans. My niece Tiffany, my sister Patricia's only child, sees my generosity as her birthright, showing up with demands instead of gratitude. My shoulders tense whenever they visit, especially after church when Tiffany's eyes follow me to Mama's antique desk where I keep the will. What they don't know is that Mrs. Geraldine, Mama's dearest friend, has copies of every important document I've ever signed. My fingers trace the cool brass key in my pocket as the stairwell groans, an old house's warning. But let me start from the beginning. Last Sunday started, like any other, since Mama passed. The autumn sun filtered through lace curtains she'd sewn herself while I arranged her china on the dining table. The scent of baked macaroni and cheese filled the house, Mama's recipe that I'd perfected over decades of Sunday gatherings. You know the kind, crispy edges, 3 kinds of cheese, and a custard so smooth it makes your eyes roll back. Tiffany sprawled in Mama's favorite armchair, thumbs dancing, across her phone screen while Patricia inspected my table setting with the precision of a health inspector. My sister's critical eye hadn't softened since we were kids, sharing a bedroom. "Really, Monique?" Patricia's nose wrinkled at the crystal water glasses. "All this fuss for leftover day? You're making the rest of us look bad." I kept my voice steady, the way Mama taught me. "These aren't leftovers, Patricia. I cooked fresh this morning, right after church." She adjusted a fork that was already perfectly aligned. "Well, it's still awful fancy for family." That's when I noticed Tiffany's phone finally lowering, her attention razor sharp as Cousin Marcus's wife mentioned something about unprotected assets from 3 tables over at church. Ever since then, Tiffany's questions about Mama's will had gotten more frequent, more pointed. "Aunt Monique," she called out, voice sticky sweet like corn syrup. "I was thinking about Grandma's papers up in the study. Maybe we should go through them together? You know, so everyone knows where everything is?" I measured my words carefully. "The will is clear, Tiffany. Mama made me sole heir and executor. There's nothing to go through." Her eyes turned to flint. "That's not fair, and you know it. Grandma wasn't thinking straight near the end." The accusation stung like a slap. Mama had been sharp as ever until her last day, something Tiffany well knew since she'd asked for and received a new car just 2 weeks before the funeral. "I need to file some papers," I said, turning toward the stairs. My sanctuary was up there, Mama's study, now mine, with its walls of books and that solid oak desk that had seen 3 generations of Carter women through their trials. Tiffany's heels clicked behind me as I climbed. Quick, impatient steps that made the old wood protest. I was halfway up when her shadow fell across my shoulders, too close for comfort. "Stop playing games." Her voice dropped to a hiss. "Hand it over now." From below, Patricia's voice rose like a theater prompt. "Just show her the papers, Monique. What are you hiding?" My hand found the banister, smooth from years of palms sliding across its surface, except for that one rough spot where Mama's wedding ring had scratched the wood. The grain bit into my palm as I gripped tighter. Something shifted in Tiffany's stance. I saw it in my peripheral vision. The subtle lean forward, the tension coiling in her shoulders. 20 years of hosting family dinners had taught me to read body language like a book. This wasn't just anger anymore. This was calculation. In that frozen moment, with Tiffany's weight shifting forward and Patricia's accusations floating up from below, I realized this Sunday would change everything. The next few seconds would redraw every boundary in our family, would test every principle Mama had planted in my soul. The stairwell creaked, and I felt the air change behind me. The world tilted sideways. One second I was standing, the next I was tumbling. Each step knocked the wind from my lungs as I crashed down. You ever had one of those moments where time slows down just enough to let you count every single mistake that led you here? That was me, watching the ceiling spin above as my body found every corner of those hardwood stairs. I landed in a heap at the bottom, pain blazing through my hip and shoulder. The taste of copper filled my mouth where I'd bit my cheek. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard Tiffany's voice, high and tight with something that wasn't concern. "Now you hand over Grandma's inheritance." She glared down from the landing, hands trembling. "I'm done asking nice." The front door slammed open. Patricia must have been watching from the porch. Her heels clattered across the foyer as she rushed in, but not to help me up. No, my sister planted herself at the bottom of the stairs, hands on her hips, looking up at her daughter with pride. "What did she do to you, baby?" Patricia called up to Tiffany. My jaw dropped. Was she serious? I tried pushing myself up, but my left side screamed in protest. "What she did to me? Your daughter just pushed me down the stairs." "Because you're hoarding what should be Tiffany's," Patricia shot back. "Mama would be ashamed of you, keeping everything for yourself." The pain in my body was nothing compared to that accusation. I could still smell Mama's rosewater perfume when I closed my eyes. Could hear her voice, clear as day. "Monique, I'm trusting you with everything because you've always had the strength to do what's right." Using the wall for support, I forced myself to standing. My breath came short and sharp, but I squared my shoulders best I could. I'm the executor and sole heir. That's what Mama wanted, that's what the will says, and that's how it's going to stay. "We'll see about that," Tiffany sneered. I didn't wait to hear more. I limped to my car, every step a reminder of what family had become. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Thomas Jenkins, the family lawyer who'd handled Mama's will. His office smelled like leather and old books, just like it had when we'd settled the estate. "They did what?" His bushy eyebrows shot up as I described the incident. "Monique, this is serious. We need to act fast." He pulled out a legal pad and started writing. "First, get photos of any bruising and see a doctor immediately. Document everything. Next, we're notifying the bank. I want a freeze on all estate accounts until we sort this out." His pen kept moving. "Start keeping a journal of every interaction, every threat, times, dates, exact words if you can remember them." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle on my already aching shoulders. "What about the house, the paperwork?" "Keep everything locked up, preferably in a safe deposit box." He looked up from his notes. "And Monique, don't be alone with either of them. Not until this is resolved." The drive home felt longer than usual, each bump in the road sending fresh pain through my hip. All I could think about was securing Mama's jewelry, especially her locket with the tiny photo of her wedding day inside. That precious piece had never left her neck until I climbed the stairs, to the study, slower this time, holding the rail like it was a lifeline. The jewelry box sat on Mama's desk where it always had, its cherry wood still glossy in the afternoon light. But when I opened the lid, my heart stopped. Empty velvet cushions stared back at me. The indentations where necklaces and rings had rested for decades looked like shallow graves. My fingers traced the oval depression where the locket should have been. The velvet, still holding its shape like a memory. The theft had already started. While I'd been at the lawyer's office, they'd crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I thought of Patricia's key, the spare I'd given her for emergencies back when I still believed in family first. Now I knew exactly how she'd spent her afternoon. I spent that evening documenting everything. You know how they say a picture's worth 1,000 words? Well, I took about 10,000 words worth of photos. The empty jewelry box, each hollow space where Mama's treasures had rested. My hands shook while I typed up the inventory list and attached the images to an email for Thomas. Evidence of unauthorized entry and removal of items from secured location. I muttered as I typed, trying to keep it professional even though my heart was breaking. Beside my laptop, I had Mama's meticulous list of every piece she'd owned, written in her careful schoolteacher's hand. The pearl earrings from Daddy, anniversary gifts spanning 30 years, the cameo brooch from her mother, all gone. That Sunday, 3 days after the fall, I made myself go to choir rehearsal. My hip still ached something fierce, but I'd been leading the altos for 15 years. Missing practice wasn't an option, not if I wanted to keep some normalcy in my life. Besides, I needed to show my face, prove I wasn't hiding. The moment I walked into the sanctuary, though, I felt it. You know that sudden hush when conversations drop to whispers? That's what happened. Sister Jenkins, who usually saved me a seat, suddenly found her sheet music fascinating. Brother Thompson, who'd been sharing his wife's pound cake with me after practice for a decade, couldn't seem to catch my eye. Sister Carter. Deacon Samuel approached, his usual warm smile replaced by something tighter. "We're praying for your situation." My situation? I wanted to ask what he'd heard, wanted to defend myself, but he was already turning away, clipboard raised like a shield. That's when I caught fragments of whispers floating between the pews. Living alone in that big house, wouldn't even share with her own blood. Maybe stress has gotten to her. Tiffany's handiwork was clear as crystal. She'd always been clever with words, knew just how to plant seeds of doubt. Now her poison was spreading through the congregation like kudzu, choking out 15 years of trust and service. I held my head high through practice, hit every note in amazing grace, even though my throat felt tight as a fist. But when I got home, the mailbox held another blow. A thick manila envelope, official court seal in the corner. My hands went cold as I read the contents. Patricia had filed a claim against the estate, challenging the will's validity. The court date stamped in red ink might as well have been a countdown timer. 6 weeks. I spread the papers across Mama's desk. The legal notice on one side, her will on the other. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder than usual, marking off precious minutes. My calendar was already filling up with deadlines, doctor's appointments for my injuries, the property tax coming due, utility bills marked in red because I'd been too shaken to send them on time. The medical bills from the fall had started arriving too. Even with insurance, the x-rays and follow-up visits were adding up fast. I pulled out my accordion file of receipts, started sorting them by date. Every repair I'd paid for, every tax bill, every improvement to the property, I had receipts for all of it. Proof I'd been a careful steward of Mama's legacy. "The truth will hold," I whispered to the empty room, but the whispers from church seemed to echo back. I could almost hear Tiffany's voice, smooth as honey, telling people how concerned she was about her poor, unstable aunt. How sad it was that I'd turned so paranoid, so greedy. By evening, my dining room table looked like an accountant's nightmare. Stacks of papers, columns of numbers, dates circled in red. 6 weeks suddenly felt like 6 minutes. The weight of it all pressed down on my shoulders until I could barely breathe. I woke up the next morning feeling like I'd aged 20 years overnight. My hip screamed every time I shifted, and the pharmacy bill for pain medication sat on my nightstand like an accusation. $147.83, nearly double what I'd budgeted for prescriptions this month. In the kitchen, I spread my checkbook and bills across the table, trying to make numbers dance that just wouldn't move. The mortgage was due in 10 days, and the late fee from last month's delayed payment had already taken a bite out of my cushion. I'd always been the one who balanced everyone else's books, paid for Patricia's car repairs, covered Tiffany's textbooks. Now here I was, watching my own careful planning unravel thread by thread. Remember those old pressure cookers our mothers used to have? The ones that would whistle and steam until you thought they might explode? That's how my head felt that morning, pressure building with every bill I sorted. The thought of 6 more weeks of this, of watching my community pull away while legal fees piled up. It was almost too much. I opened my laptop, cursor blinking in a fresh email. Maybe if I offered Tiffany something, not everything, but enough to quiet her down, I could keep the house, let her have some of the investments. My fingers hovered over the keys, ready to type out surrender just to buy some peace. Your mother would tan your hide if she saw you even thinking about it. I jumped at the sharp knock, 3 quick raps that could only belong to one person. When I opened the door, Mrs. Geraldine stood there, ramrod straight in her Sunday best, though it was only Tuesday morning. She'd been Mama's closest friend for 30 years, ran the church building fund with an iron fist and perfect penmanship. "Child, you look like you haven't slept in a week," she said, stepping past me into the foyer. She had her big purse tucked under one arm, the one she called her business bag, and was already heading for the kitchen like she owned the place. "Put the kettle on. We need tea for this conversation." I didn't argue. You don't argue with Mrs. Geraldine. While I filled the kettle, she settled herself at my kitchen table, taking in the spread of bills and legal papers with sharp eyes that didn't miss a thing. "Patricia's girl pushed you down those stairs," she said. "Not a question. Your mama saw this coming, you know, saw how that child was growing up wrong, all want and no wisdom." The kettle whistled, and I busied myself with the tea things, grateful for the familiar ritual. Mama's rose-painted cups, the silver sugar bowl that needed polishing. Mrs. Geraldine waited until I'd poured before reaching into her purse and pulling out a slim white envelope. "Your mother trusted me with copies," she said, laying it on the table between us. "Said they might matter someday. Told me to watch and wait, and if trouble came, to make sure these found their way to you." My hands shook as I picked up the envelope. It wasn't sealed. The flap was tucked in, like it had been opened, and closed many times. Whatever was inside, Mama had wanted it kept safe but accessible. Ready. "Before you open that," Mrs. Geraldine said quietly, "you need to understand something. There's no going halfway with this. Once you see what's in there, you'll have to choose. Protect your mama's wishes or keep the peace. You can't do both." I set the envelope down next to Patricia's court summons and Mama's will. 3 papers that could tear my family apart for good. The weight of it pressed against my chest until I could barely breathe. Mrs. Geraldine pressed a handkerchief into my hand, one of Mama's old ones, edged with tatted lace and smelling faintly of the rose oil she'd always worn. The familiar scent hit me like a wave, bringing back Sunday mornings, watching her pin it to her dress before church. Something flickered in my chest, small but steady as a candle flame. Not quite courage yet, but maybe the start of it. The next morning, before the sun could even think about rising, I sat at my kitchen table with that envelope. Just me, a cup of coffee going cold, and the weight of what had to be done. You know those moments when you can feel your whole life about to change? This was one of those. My hands weren't quite steady as I pulled out the contents, a neat stack of photocopies, each one clear as day. Trust Mama to make sure every detail showed up crisp and readable. And trust Mrs. Geraldine to keep them pristine all this time. First came the bank signature cards, then copies of checks, all arranged in date order with Mama's neat cursive notes in the margins. She'd always kept records like that, teaching me from childhood that good books keep good families. Funny how that lesson was coming back around now. Something caught my eye on the 3rd check. A deposit slip with Tiffany's signature, dated 6 months before Mama passed. The amount wasn't large, just $450, but there was something off about how it lined up with the account permissions. I spread out more papers, checking dates against signatures. My stomach tightened as the pattern emerged. Small withdrawals, nothing that would raise immediate alarms. 200 here, 300 there. But the permissions didn't match up. According to the bank cards, Tiffany shouldn't have had access to those accounts at all. The signatures authorizing her, they looked close to Mama's, but not quite right. I pulled out my phone and opened a fresh note, started logging everything chronologically. Timestamps, account numbers, transaction amounts. Each entry another nail in the coffin of family peace. You ever try to convince yourself you're not seeing what's right in front of you? I did that. For about 10 minutes before I had to admit the truth, Tiffany had been forging signatures, and Mama had known it. The coffee was stone cold by the time I finished my list. 23 transactions, spread over 8 months, each one documented with the kind of detail only Mama could manage. She must have spent weeks gathering all this, never saying a word to anyone but Mrs. Geraldine. My lawyer's number was on speed dial by now. She picked up, on the second ring, professional as always, even at this early hour. "I need to see you," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I've got documentation that changes everything." We set up a meeting for that afternoon. She told me to bring everything: original documents, copies, my timeline, everything that could establish a clear chain of custody. This wasn't just about protecting the estate anymore. This was about fraud. I sent a quick text to Mrs. Geraldine. "Thank you. Lawyer wants to meet. Would you be willing to explain how you got these copies?" Her response came back almost immediately. "Already cleared my schedule. Just tell me when." That's when my phone buzzed again. "Patricia." The message made my hands clench. "Withdraw, or we will finish this publicly." I stood at the kitchen sink, running water over breakfast dishes I barely remembered eating. My hands were wet, soap bubbles clinging to my wrists, but I could feel steel running through my spine. They thought they could threaten me into silence? After what they'd done? The warm water ran over my fingers, and I remembered Mama standing at this same sink, teaching me to wash the good china. Sometimes, she'd told me, doing right means some folks won't like you much. Do it anyway. I dried my hands slowly, deliberately, each movement a decision being made. Patricia wanted public? Well, maybe it was time to let the truth have its day in court. You ever notice how time moves differently when you're preparing for battle? That week felt like one long day, stretched thin as taffy, every hour marked by another paper added to my growing file. I laid it all out on my dining room table, the one Mama and I used to polish every Sunday after church. Bank statements fanned out like playing cards, each one highlighted, where Tiffany's transactions stood out like sore thumbs. The jewelry inventory, typed up neat with photographs of empty spots where precious memories used to sit. And right in the center, protected in a plastic sleeve, the notarized will that started all this trouble. "Everything needs tabs," my lawyer had said. "Color-coded, dated, indexed. Make it easy for the judge to follow the money." So there I sat, armed with little sticky flags in rainbow colors, marking every piece of evidence like I was preparing for the world's most depressing scrapbook. Have you ever tried to put a price tag on family betrayal? I did that week. Had to catalog every piece of stolen jewelry, right down to the paste pearls Mama wore to church. The real punch in the gut wasn't the dollar value. It was remembering how each piece came to be in that box. The locket from Daddy before he passed, the bracelet from her 40th anniversary. Each one had a story, and now each one had a cold little number beside it in my spreadsheet. Wednesday morning found me in my lawyer's conference room, the smell of fresh toner hanging in the air like expensive perfume. We went through authentication procedures until my head spun. How to prove this was Mama's real signature versus Tiffany's forgeries. How to demonstrate the timeline of theft. "Again," my lawyer said, tapping, her pen against a legal pad. "Walk me through when you first noticed the jewelry missing." I repeated it for what felt like the 100th time, each word measured and careful. The conference room lights hummed overhead, making everything feel slightly unreal. But the papers spread between us were real enough, each one a brick in the wall I was building between me and my family. Come Sunday, I still went to church. Habit, maybe, or just plain stubbornness. You know how it feels when a room goes quiet as you walk in? That kind of quiet followed me down the aisle. Folks who'd hugged me every Sunday for 20 years suddenly found their hymnals fascinating. I could almost see Tiffany's rumors clinging to every note of Amazing Grace. That afternoon, I spread my bills across the kitchen counter. Rent, utilities, medical copays from the fall, they stacked up like accusations. I'd always been the one who helped others with their money troubles. Now here I was, watching my savings drain away while my own blood tried to take what little security I had left. Around midnight, I sat at my computer, staring at a draft email to Patricia. The cursor blinked at me like a judging eye as I typed out an offer. We could settle this quietly, split things down the middle, keep our dirty laundry inside the family. My finger hovered over the send button while the clock on my wall ticked past midnight. A soft rustle made me turn. The envelope from Mrs. Geraldine sat in my file box, its contents whispering of truth that couldn't be unsaid. All those careful copies, all that evidence of what Tiffany had done. It felt alive somehow, demanding to be heard. I deleted the draft. Every word of compromise vanished with a few keystrokes. Instead, I typed 5 words. I will see you in court. My cursor hovered over send again, but differently this time. The screen's light cast a cold glow across my hands, making them look older than I remembered. 23 forged transactions, 8 months of quiet theft. 1 push down a staircase. The numbers ran through my head like a bitter arithmetic. My finger was still hovering over that send button when my phone lit up with Mrs. Geraldine's number. Past midnight calls usually mean bad news, but when I answered, her voice carried that steady steel I remembered from countless choir fundraisers. "Come by before you decide anything," she said. Just like that, no hello, no small talk. "I've got coffee on." Now you might wonder why I'd drive across town at midnight for coffee. But when Mrs. Geraldine calls, you answer. That's just how it is. She'd been Mama's right hand in church business for 30 years, kept the books so clean you could eat off them. If she was up this late waiting for me, she had her reasons. 20 minutes later, I was sitting at her kitchen table, that familiar smell of Maxwell House and lemon furniture polish wrapping around me like an old friend. Her kitchen hadn't changed since I was a girl. Same yellow curtains, same rooster clock on the wall. Only difference was the thick manila envelope she set down between our coffee cups. "Your mother," Mrs. Geraldine said, sliding her reading glasses up her nose, "was a careful woman. She knew what might come after she was gone." Her arthritis-curved fingers worked the envelope's metal clasp with practiced care. "These are the originals." One by one, she laid them out. Endorsed checks with dates clear as day, a bank form filled out in Mama's steady hand, and, my heart nearly stopped, a notarized letter specifically addressing permissions for handling estate matters. Each document was pristine, protected in archive-quality sleeves. "Look at the signatures," Mrs. Geraldine said, tapping one check with a painted nail. "Your mother had her own way of writing. See how the Y drops straight down? No loop?" I nodded, memories of watching Mama sign church bulletins flooding back. She'd always said flourishes were for people with something to prove. "Now look at these." Mrs. Geraldine pulled out the papers Tiffany had submitted to the court. She laid them side by side with a check dated 6 months before Mama passed. "See that little loop there? The one that shows up in every signature?" The room tilted as it hit me. That loop, that tiny, perfect, consistent loop, was like a fingerprint at a crime scene. Tiffany hadn't just started forging signatures after Mama died. She'd been practicing, perfecting her technique, laying groundwork for months or maybe years before. "Oh, Lord," I whispered, my coffee going cold and forgotten. "She was planning this all along." Mrs. Geraldine nodded grimly. "Your mother noticed something wasn't right with some small withdrawals. Asked me to keep copies of everything, just in case. Said she didn't want to believe it, but better safe than sorry." My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. "Mind if I document this?" When she nodded, I started photographing everything, the documents themselves, Mrs. Geraldine holding each one, close-ups of the signatures. I logged the time and date of each photo, noted the location and circumstances in my notes app. "I'll need you on the witness list," I said, already typing her contact information into a message from my lawyer. "You can testify to chain of custody, verify when Mama gave you these copies." "Child, I've got dated receipts for..." These protective sleeves and a notarized statement from your mother about why she wanted me to keep records. Mrs. Geraldine's smile had a sharp edge to it. I may be old, but I know how to build a case. I called my lawyer right there from Mrs. Geraldine's kitchen. Got her voicemail, of course, at that hour. But I left a detailed message about the new evidence and the need to revise our exhibit sequence. We'd need to prepare direct examination, questions that would nail down every date, every signature, every deliberate stroke of Tiffany's pen. Setting my alarm for court in the morning felt different now. The weight in my chest had shifted from dread to something harder, cleaner. Tiffany hadn't just betrayed us after Mama died. She'd been betraying us while Mama was alive, smiling across Sunday dinners while practicing her forgeries. My alarm went off at 4:30 a.m., though I'd barely slept. Funny how some mornings feel like turning points before you even get out of bed. You know what I mean? Like your body's already braced for whatever's coming. I took my time getting ready, each movement measured and deliberate. The black suit I'd laid out the night before had been Mama's favorite. Classic cut, subtle pinstripe that caught the dawn light filtering through my bedroom window. My hands only shook a little as I fastened the pearl buttons she'd sewn on herself, replacing the original plastic ones because, as she'd said, some details matter more than others. The tabbed binder sat on my kitchen table like a loaded weapon. I'd triple-checked every page the night before, but I went through it one more time as I sipped my coffee. Each document was arranged in chronological order, clear as stepping stones across a pond. Mrs. Geraldine's originals were safely stored in their protective sleeves, with copies ready for the court record. The drive downtown was quiet, streets still sleeping except for delivery trucks and early bird joggers. I parked in the courthouse lot at 7:15, 45 minutes early, but my lawyer was already waiting on the steps. Miranda Thompson, sharp in her charcoal pantsuit, gave me a firm nod as I approached. "Ready?" she asked, extending her hand for the binder. "As I'll ever be." I handed it over, watching as she did her own final check of the tabs. We were reviewing our presentation sequence when I heard the click of heels on concrete. Looking up, I saw Tiffany strutting toward us in a blazer so bright blue it hurt my eyes. The color reminded me of those tropical fish that use flashy displays to distract from their poison. Patricia scurried alongside her, lips moving constantly, like she was feeding Tiffany lines through an invisible earpiece. My stomach clenched, but I kept my face neutral. Years of church politics had taught me that sometimes the best response is no response at all. Inside, the courtroom smelled of lemon polish and old wood, not so different from Mrs. Geraldine's kitchen. But there was nothing comforting about it now. We took our places at the petitioner's table, Miranda arranging our materials with precise movements while I focused on keeping my breathing steady. The judge entered, a woman about my age, with reading glasses on a chain and eyes that looked like they'd seen every trick in the book. As soon as she called the session to order, Tiffany took the stand. Lord have mercy, that girl could act. She transformed right before our eyes, her usual smirk melting into a mask of earnest concern. "I'm only here because I want what Grandma intended," she said, her voice softened to a careful purr. She always meant for the estate to benefit the whole family. I gripped the edge of our table, feeling the smooth wood under my fingers, letting it ground me. Mama's voice echoed in my head. Patience isn't just waiting, it's waiting with purpose. Then Patricia took the stand, and my grip tightened. "My sister's become unstable since Mama passed," she declared, each word falling like ash. "She's controlling, paranoid. She's turned our mother's home into her personal fortress." The grit in my throat threatened to choke me, but I kept my eyes fixed on the judge's pen as it moved across her legal pad. Each scratch of ink meant another lie recorded, another claim that would soon collapse under its own weight. Miranda's hand touched my arm. Our signal. The judge looked up from her notes. "Counsel," she said, "you may present your evidence." I stood, my heart hammering, against my ribs but my breath finally steady. The binder felt solid in my hands, heavy with truth, and Mrs. Geraldine's meticulous records. Tiffany's small, satisfied smile flickered as I moved toward the bench. Sometimes justice needs nothing more than sunlight and careful documentation. And baby, was I about to let the sun shine in. I placed the black binder on the judge's desk with hands steadier than I'd expected. Maybe it was knowing truth had my back, or maybe it was remembering how Mama used to say, "Stand tall when you're standing right." "Your Honor," Miranda began, "we'd like to start with Exhibit A, the signature cards from First National Bank, showing Mrs. Evelyn Carter's authentic signature from 2018 through 2022. The judge slipped on her reading glasses, studying the enlarged copies we'd prepared. Miranda pointed out the distinctive way Mama wrote her E, with a flowing loop that danced up into the V of her first name. "Now, if you'll compare that to Exhibit B," Miranda continued, laying out the checks Tiffany had allegedly co-signed, "you'll notice the difference in the signature style. From where I sat, I could see Tiffany's fingers drumming against her thigh, a nervous tell I remembered from when she was caught stealing cookies as a child. Only now she'd graduated from swiping sweets to forging signatures. Your Honor," Miranda went on, "we've highlighted the dates on these checks. They correspond exactly with periods when Mrs. Evelyn Carter was hospitalized." She presented Exhibit C, Mama's hospital discharge papers, each one time-stamped and dated. "As you can see, it would have been physically impossible for Mrs. Carter to sign these checks during her hospital stays." The courtroom air grew thick with tension. You could have heard a church fan drop. "We call Mrs. Geraldine Washington to the stand," Miranda announced. Mrs. Geraldine walked to the witness box with the dignity of her 70 years, her gray twists neat under a small hat. She'd dressed for battle in her Sunday best, a cream suit with pearl buttons that Mama had always admired. "Mrs. Washington, what was your relationship with the deceased, Mrs. Evelyn Carter?" "We were dear friends for over 40 years, Mrs. Geraldine replied, her voice clear and strong. "We served together on the church finance committee. Evelyn was our treasurer for 15 years. "And did Mrs. Carter discuss her banking practices with you?" "Oh, yes. Evelyn was methodical about her money. She made every deposit herself, kept copies of everything, and wrote detailed notes about each transaction." Mrs. Geraldine's eyes flickered to Tiffany. "She never authorized anyone else to handle her accounts. She was quite particular about that." Miranda projected blown-up images of the forged signatures onto a screen. Even from my seat, the differences were glaring. Mama's natural flow versus Tiffany's careful imitation. "Mrs. Washington, did Mrs. Carter ever mention giving her granddaughter, Tiffany, permission to access her accounts?" "Never." Mrs. Geraldine's voice could have cut steel. In fact, she expressed concerns about Tiffany's spending habits more than once. I heard Tiffany's sharp intake of breath. Her carefully constructed calm was cracking like cheap paint. Patricia's jaw had gone so tight I worried for her teeth. Then came the jewelry inventory. 3 pages of Mama's precise handwriting, listing every piece, including provenance. "Gift from Herbert, 1975. Grandmother Rose's pearls. Mother's wedding band. Reset, 1982. Miranda placed the inventory beside photographs I'd taken of the empty jewelry box. "Your Honor, these items disappeared from the secured study after the defendant's last visit to the house." A gasp rippled through the courtroom like wind through summer leaves. Several heads turned toward Tiffany, who'd gone still as a statue. The judge removed her glasses, leaning forward with the kind of look that makes grown folks squirm. I recognized that look. Mama wore it whenever she caught someone in a lie too big to talk their way out of. "Miss Carter," she addressed Tiffany directly, "would you care to explain these discrepancies?" Tiffany's mouth opened and closed, but for once in her life, she had nothing to say. The careful script she'd prepared had just gone up in smoke. I felt no joy in her distress, just a bone-deep sadness that it had come to this. The old saying is right, the truth will out. Sometimes it just needs a little help from careful record-keeping and a friend who knows the value of keeping copies. The judge picked up her gavel, and my heart did a funny little skip. You know that moment when you're about to hear something that'll change everything? That's what it felt like in that courtroom. Having reviewed the evidence presented, the judge began, her voice carrying that weight of authority that fills a room. This court finds the claim against the estate not only without merit, but deliberately fraudulent. She fixed Tiffany with a look that could have wilted flowers. The claim is dismissed with prejudice. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. But she wasn't done. Furthermore, this court orders immediate restitution for all stolen property. The judge consulted her notes, including, but not limited to, one gold locket with pearl inlay valued at $2,800, one diamond anniversary ring valued at $3,500, one sapphire pendant with chain valued at $1,200. As she read through the list, each item felt like Mama was being returned to me, piece by piece. The total came to just over $15,000 in jewelry alone. Additionally, and here's where Tiffany's face went from pale to ghost white, all unauthorized withdrawals must be repaid in full. The court finds these withdrawals total $23,457.82, documented across 16 separate transactions. "But that's not fair!" Tiffany burst out, her voice cracking. "I can't possibly—" The judge's gavel came down hard. "Miss Carter, you will maintain order in this court." Her tone could have frozen hot coffee. "The restitution schedule is as follows. Monthly payments of no less than $1,500 until the full amount of $38,457.82 is satisfied." I watched Tiffany's carefully constructed facade crumble like wet cardboard. Her shoulders started shaking, and those theatrical little sobs she'd used to manipulate Mama all those years finally made an appearance. But this time, they weren't working their usual magic. The same folks who'd been side-eyeing me in church were now looking at her like they'd caught her stealing from the collection plate. Patricia kept her eyes glued to the floor, her fingers twisting in her lap. The clerk's voice droned on, reading payment details into the record. First payment due within 30 days. Payments to be made through the court trustee. Failure to comply will result in— I gathered my exhibits, sliding them back into the binder with hands that had finally stopped trembling. Each tab fell into place with a satisfying little snap, like puzzle pieces clicking home. Beside me, Miranda gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze. The whispers that had been hounding me for weeks were shifting direction now, like wind changing course. I caught fragments. "Can you believe she forged?" And "all this time pretending to be," and poor Monique having to deal with— Tiffany's sobs got louder, but nobody moved to comfort her. Funny how quickly sympathy dries up when the truth comes to light. Even Patricia, who'd spent years excusing her daughter's behavior, sat frozen in her chair, looking like she'd aged 10 years. In the last hour, as we stood for the judge's exit, I felt something settle in my chest. Not happiness exactly, but maybe peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you stood your ground when it mattered. Out in the hallway, I caught my reflection in the glass panel of a fire extinguisher cabinet. The woman looking back at me stood straight, despite the lingering ache in her back, her shoulders squared under her black suit jacket. She looked like Mama, I realized with a start. Not in features, but in that quiet strength that says, "I know who I am, and I won't be erased." Behind me, I could hear Tiffany still sniffling and the click of Patricia's heels as they hurried toward the exit. The restitution order felt heavy in my hand, and I found myself wondering if they'd actually pay or try to dodge it somehow. But that was tomorrow's problem. For now, I just stood there, feeling the weight of justice settle around my shoulders like one of Mama's old shawls, warm, familiar, and exactly where it belonged. The first restitution payment arrived exactly 30 days after the court date, right on schedule. I'll admit, I was surprised. I'd half expected Tiffany and Patricia to drag their feet. But there it was, a cashier's check for exactly $1,500, processed through the court trustee just like the judge ordered. You know, what's funny? After all the drama, watching those payments come in felt almost anticlimactic. Each month, I'd scan the receipt, save it in my growing digital folder, backed up in 3 different places because fool me once, and check it off my tracking spreadsheet. The late fees that had been eating away at my peace of mind finally stopped compounding. One by one, the red numbers in my budget turned black. My phone buzzed one Sunday morning while I was getting ready for church. It was Deacon Samuel, of all people. His text read, "Sister Monique, I owe you an apology. I should have known better than to believe those rumors. Your mother raised you right, and I failed to honor her memory by doubting you. Please forgive me." I had to sit down on my bed after reading that one. You know that feeling when a knot you've been carrying so long you forgot it was there suddenly loosens? That's what it felt like. I typed back a simple, "Thank you, Deacon. That means a lot." Because sometimes less is more. Miranda, my lawyer, called to set up a final meeting to close out the case file. "The restitution schedule is running smoothly," she said. "But let's talk about long-term security for the estate assets." The meeting was quick and practical. We set up additional safeguards, updated beneficiary information, and put a few extra legal padlocks in place, just in case. Because if there's one thing this whole mess taught me, it's that you can never be too careful, even with family, especially with family. That evening, I sat at my desk with a stack of note cards. There were quite a few relatives who'd stayed silent through the whole ordeal. Cousins who'd ducked my calls, aunts who'd suddenly been too busy for Sunday dinner. I knew some had believed Tiffany's lies, while others just didn't want to take sides. Each card got the same message, carefully worded to be gracious but firm. Family matters to me, but so do boundaries. When you're ready to rebuild trust, my door is open. The sun was setting by the time I finished the last card. I looked at the clock, just enough light left for what I needed to do next. I grabbed my keys and drove to Mama's house, my house now, though sometimes I still catch myself thinking of it as hers. The back gate creaked just like it always had as I unlocked it. Mama used to say that creak was better than any security system. You couldn't sneak through that gate if you tried. The rose garden stretched out before me, and even in the fading light, I could see the new red buds pushing through. Mama's roses were fighters, just like she was, just like she taught me to be. I set my pruning shears down on the old stone wall, the same wall where Mama used to sit and tell me stories while she worked. The evening air was cooling, but it still held that sweet rose scent that used to wrap around us during our Sunday evening gardening sessions. Those were our quiet times, just me and Mama, cutting and arranging and keeping what was worth keeping. Standing there, watching the last light fade through the leaves, I knew what tomorrow would bring. Time for some strategic pruning, cutting away the dead wood to let the healthy stems thrive. Then arranging the blooms just so, like Mama taught me. And keeping, yes, keeping what matters most, the memory of her hands guiding mine, showing me how to tend what's precious. I picked up the shears as night settled in, feeling their familiar weight. The roses swayed gently in the evening breeze, their buds promising tomorrow's blooms. The next morning, I was up before the sun. Something about dawn in Mama's garden always pulled me back, especially now. The air was still cool enough to need a light sweater as I made my way through the gate, pruning shears in one hand and a metal pail in the other. You ever notice how news travels in waves? Well, word of the court verdict had swept through our community like a summer storm. My phone had been lighting up with texts from church members who'd seen Tiffany trying to work out payment plans with creditors. "Looking mighty humble now," Sister Jenkins wrote. "Saw her at the bank yesterday, shoulders down low." I didn't respond, didn't need to. Truth has a way of doing its own talking. Patricia hadn't shown her face at Wednesday night Bible study in weeks. Last I heard, she was picking up extra shifts at the hospital to help cover Tiffany's restitution payments. The court order had hit them both where it hurt. Most, their wallets and their pride. Funny how quickly folks forget to be arrogant when they're writing checks they can't afford to bounce. I settled into my usual spot by the stone wall and started trimming. The morning light was just beginning to peek through, hitting the dewdrops on the rose petals in a way that made them sparkle like tiny diamonds. Made me think of Mama's missing jewelry, though thanks to that court order, its value would be coming back to the estate, one garnished paycheck at a time. You've got to be thorough when you're pruning, Mama used to tell me. Cut away everything that doesn't serve the plant. Her words felt different now, weighted with new meaning. I'd had to be thorough too. With the evidence, with the boundaries, with protecting what she'd built. Each snip of my shears felt like punctuation on that lesson. The sun climbed higher, catching the fence, posts Mama had painted that soft cream color she loved. I remember the day we painted them together, how she insisted on doing it herself even when her hands weren't as steady as they used to be. Everything worth keeping needs maintaining, she'd said, dabbing paint on my nose to make me laugh. I filled my pail with water and started arranging the cut blooms. Some stems were straight and true, others needed extra trimming to sit right. Kind of, like how handling Tiffany and Patricia had required different approaches. Sometimes you need steel, sometimes you need softness. But you always need to know which is which. The church gossip mill was running full tilt these days. Heard Tiffany tried to put in a loan application at 3 different banks, got turned down flat each time. Those forged signatures on court records have a way of following you around. Patricia wasn't doing much better. Seems nursing supervisors don't take kindly to staff with documented ethics violations, even if they happened outside the hospital. Looking at my roses in the morning light, I picked out one perfect bloom, deep red, petals just starting to open. The kind Mama would have chosen for her Sunday centerpiece. I held it up, breathed in its sweet scent, and made a quiet promise. Keep the books clean, the boundaries bright, and the legacy strong. The yard was quiet except for early birds and the soft rustle of leaves. Peace settled over everything like the morning dew, and for the first time in months, I felt it settle inside me too. Standing there in Mama's garden, my garden now, I whispered the truth that had played out right before my eyes. Greed always buries itself. My clippers found another stem needing attention. In the distance, a church bell chimed the hour. Another Sunday was beginning, but this one felt different, lighter somehow. I had work to do, roses to tend, and a legacy to protect. And now everybody knew exactly what that meant.